So last week we started with, our first reading was God's covenant with Noah, which the sign for which was a rainbow. And God promised never to destroy the earth in that same complete way. And this week we have another covenant. This is the Lent year that we get covenants. And this is a covenant God made with Abram and Sarai, and as part of that covenant, he renamed them, gave them new names, Abraham and Sarah. Not completely different, but different enough. And the thing is that this isn't the first time God has promised them. This is the covenant, but we already had a time when God came, and you remember he promised Abraham that his descendants would be as many as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the sea. And time goes by, and Abraham has no children. And in order to have that many descendants, first you have to start with one, right? And they start to wonder and to figure out, are they supposed to do something else? And as you probably remember, Sarai decides to take matters into her own hands and provides the servant girl Hagar to become the mother, and Ishmael is born, and so at least Abraham has one descendant. But it turns out, as we know from today, that God has other things in mind, that even though Sarai in this situation is like in her 90s and past the time of childbearing, God insists that she will become a mother. And as we know, she does, and Isaac is born. So this whole idea of covenant, and we are part of that covenant, right? It's made to Abraham and all his children and his children's children forever. So that's us, right? Here we are in that covenant. And then we go to the gospel. And in order to kind of talk about this, I want to back up just a little bit, because I think this context is important. Oh, but actually there's something else I wanted to say about Sarai. Here's what I get for not looking at my notes enough. I think about that long time of waiting, you know, and it was, I think there's another time God comes and says, oh yeah, it's going to happen. And they just keep being faithful and keep waiting. And I relate to Sarai especially because I myself went through the pain of infertility. And now that I have a beautiful daughter that we adopted, it's hard in a way to remember or to relate, but I do remember that in the moment it was really hard. And I know for certain I am not the only one in this room who has experienced that. And it is painful, and it's a longing that you get to the feeling like it's the only thing that you want in the world, and why can't you have it? And it's hard. And I also know that in this room, every one of us has struggled with one thing or another. I don't think there's a person here who hasn't experienced some kind of loss of a loved one, a death, a loss of a job, a loss of a dream. And some of us are in the middle of grief right now, and it is a powerful, powerful thing. And so I think I take partly from that story of Abram and Sarai, who become Abraham and Sarah when their name is changed, just this realization and in a way this comfort of knowing that it is the human condition, that we all share that in common. And I'm going to come back to this, but I wanted to make sure I talked about that because it's important. So now looking at the gospel. Right before the part that Glenn just read, they're on their way to Caesarea Philippi, which some of us visited. That's the one with the cave. They're on their way, and Jesus says to his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answer, well, John the Baptist. Some people are saying John the Baptist. Some people are saying Elijah or some other prophet. And then Jesus says, and who do you say that I am? And who is the one who has the answer? Peter. Right. Peter says, you are the Messiah. Another translation says, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah. And so Peter gets it right? And Jesus says, don't tell anyone. And then we get to this passage. So Peter says, you are the Messiah. And it's like, ding, 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 ding. Yep, you got it, right? Good job. And then immediately, he blows it. The same guy who just got it right gets it very wrong. He says, Jesus starts to tell them what's going to happen. These are called the passion predictions. And you wonder if later when it happens, then it starts to sink in, and in the moment they can hardly take it in. But Jesus tells them that he is going to be rejected and killed, and on the third day rise again. And I think maybe because Peter has just gotten this, very right, and he says, you are the Messiah, it just doesn't compute, right? It just can't. That's not who the Messiah is to him. The Messiah can't be killed. That makes no sense. So Peter says, nope, can't be, and he rebukes Jesus, and Jesus has to rebuke him back. Kind of a severe way. And there's a part of me that wishes Peter would have just been able to say, wow, I don't understand that, right? Or, well, that's very confusing, Jesus. Can you say more? Or even, are you kidding? Right? But to say, no, that can't happen. There's probably a part of Jesus being very human that would like to go there. Oh, you're right. Yeah, let's not do that. So Peter gets it, and then he doesn't. And I find that comforting too, because sometimes I feel like I'm really getting it. I'm really understanding. I'm really in a good place with my faith, and then there are other times when I'm not. There are other times when I'm a bit lost. And to know that getting it and then not getting it is kind of normal, maybe. That's a good thing. So the other thing is that then Jesus goes into this whole thing about taking up your cross, and if you save your life, you'll lose it, and if you lose your life for my sake, you will save it. And I think that's a bit harder for us to relate to in our world. In the time that Mark is writing this gospel, Christians were suffering, right? And over the ages, especially early ages, and even now in some places, Christians are being killed for their faith. It is a thing, but it's not really our reality. We are not being asked, we're not being thrown to the lions, right? Sometimes we might suffer a little embarrassment if we feel like somebody says, do you go to church? I don't know, I hope not, but I don't think that we can claim that we are in the same place that Mark's audience was in. So, and I think that that's very real, and I don't mean to discount that, but I have a little bit different take on it because of our cultural context. And I like to think that when Jesus says, take up your cross, the fact is that we all do. We all, like I said, we all carry hard things. We all deal with hard things. And that what Jesus might be saying is, it's all, I'm there in it all. It's all part of this, and you don't have to hold it back and pretend it's not there. It is all part of who you are, and it's all welcome here. I worked at another church, and one day I got a call from a family that had belonged to the church years before, and they had stopped coming. It had been a long time since they had been there, but they had been in another church, and they had a tragedy. The father in this family was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer and was facing the end of his life in a very real way, and they reached out to me. So I went to visit and prayed with them, and getting to know them, I was asking about their life, and they had been very active at this church. Their two sons had been in Sunday school, and they'd grown up, and they were there every week, and they were in. And I said, why did you stop going? And they said, our sons got into trouble. They got into some drugs, and one of them was incarcerated, and we were too embarrassed to go to church. And it broke my heart because I think that's the time when you need your church community. You know, that's the moment when you need to go and say, I need your prayers, I need your help, we need support. And because they stopped at that time, they didn't ever feel like they could go back, you know, at some point. And so they lost an immense amount, an immense community, you know, for themselves. So I think that we need to know that we can bring all of those things, our embarrassment, our grief, our failures, our hopes, all of it is safe here. We can bring it all. And maybe that's part of what Jesus is talking about. And I think it's really, really important that we know that whoever we are, where we are in our faith journey, this is the place to be. This is who we need to be for one another. And the thing is that when Jesus gives his passion prediction and he talks about what's going to happen, he doesn't end with the cross, does he? He says, and in 3 days we'll rise again. And that when we are with one another in those hard places, I'm not discounting those hard places. They are real, and you don't have to pretend you're over it, you know, in order to be here. But we can be with one another there, but we know that that's not the end. We know about the resurrection. Even in the middle of Lent, we know Easter is there. Easter is coming. So I just want to end with this song, thinking about how God changed Abraham and Sarah's names. And I was at a conference with clergy, Episcopal clergy, and one of the leaders sang this to us. And I almost said that he sang it to me because it felt so personal. But it goes like this. I will change your name. You shall no longer be called wounded, outcast, lonely, or afraid. I will change your name. Your new name shall be confidence, faithfulness, overcoming one, thankfulness, friend of God, one who sees